Welcome again, everyone, to this third episode of Sellics Thursday Live. Sellics Thursday Live is a weekly show that we do every Thursday in which we invite Amazon industry experts to discuss strategies and tactics on how to successfully sell on Amazon. And today I'm excited to have Karina with me. Karina is a longtime Amazon veteran in some way. So Karina has been at Amazon and as part of the vendor management team for many years. And so since then, she's built up her own agency and her own community also. I'm sure she will tell us a bit more about this. Karina, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me on the show today. So yes, I'm a bit, makes me feel a bit old, really. I've been in the Amazon space for over 15 years now. So seen a lot happen, a lot change. I spent 7 years working for Amazon in vendor management in the UK. And then has spent the last 8 years working with sellers and vendors, helping them grow their business on Amazon across North America and Europe. And so now I have an agency, a consulting and retail agency where we help sellers and vendors grow their business. And there's a small team of us, a team of 12, a number of us ex-Amazonian as well, and helping our clients with expertise from almost both sides of the fence. And also have another business as well, Vendor Society, which is where we have a community of vendors over between about 250, 300 vendors across the globe, where we sort of connect with one another and share experiences with what's going on, especially times like these. That community always helps.
Right. Fantastic. So today we want to talk about vendors and hybrids, and specifically how vendors are affected by the Corona crisis, right? Karina obviously is working with vendors and sellers, but due to her background on the vendor side, we thought that it makes sense to focus specifically on vendors and hybrids. So by hybrids we mean brands that have a vendor account and also a seller account, right? A strategy that I think is getting more and more popular. And so how those vendors, so customers that have a 1P business, how they have been affected by the Corona crisis so far. So today is April 9th, right? 2020. It is essentially week 3 or 4 of most of the national lockdowns, right? So I think Germany is in week 4 now, UK probably week 3 or something. The US depends on the region, also somewhere in that range, right? Things are changing obviously on a weekly basis, if not on a daily basis. Nonetheless, obviously, I think there are some patterns and some trends that have emerged. Karina, what have you seen so far happening in the vendor community?
In the vendor community, I mean, it's very similar to the seller community, with this point where Amazon turned around and all of a sudden nobody was receiving any purchase orders. And Amazon being Amazon, unfortunately, there doesn't always come an announcement. The announcement comes after the panic, when people realize that there's no purchase orders being raised, or in some instances, some clients actually received huge purchase orders that made them panic, almost as if to say, these kind of purchase orders are going to put us out of stock, because no one was really sort of at that point in time. They sort of realized that there were initial stages of lockdown, but didn't really understand the extent of what was really happening. And so first of all, it was very much the vendors in certain product categories not receiving those purchase orders, and then Amazon making that announcement and then being a lot more clearer when that announcement came out on seller, which was very much around the FBA shipments, only being able to raise for non-essentials. And they then said the same on vendor, as in, we're sending out purchase orders on the essentials, but the non-essentials, you may see a delay or you might not see any purchase orders at all. Right. And so very much you then sort of see this announcement across the board. Now that's changed over the weeks. Some businesses have seen, as I said, some have seen a surge in orders and continue to see a surge. So with the panic thinking that that's going to put them in a position where Amazon's stockpiling or overstock, in actual fact, the demand had increased. So they're seeing the sales in surge, but they're also seeing sales out surge as well. But then you've also had businesses that had no purchase orders. But some of those that had no purchase orders and almost went into a state of panic of, we're not receiving any orders, we haven't for the last few weeks, we have seen, and from conversations with vendors this week, a lot more purchase orders coming in. Some are not necessarily as high and not for the wider selection, but we've definitely seen things shift in the last week.
If I'm a vendor now, right, and I was unfortunate to be in the wrong category for some time, right, and even though now that the definition is getting a bit more broad, I still see a lot less POs that I'm used to, right? What can I do?
Yeah. Really, the question here and the real impact is supply, is that you as a vendor are dependent on Amazon to be able to supply the customer on Amazon, and you need those purchase orders. But you can't dictate to Amazon, what they order, and you can't tell Amazon when to order. And so there are many vendors sitting there, probably looking into their systems every day, thinking when that purchase order is coming, and it doesn't come. Or it has come and it's half the size, or we've even seen Amazon cancel orders from bulk orders and so forth in the past when they've decided that they no longer want those products. So really, when it comes to supply, because they're waiting, how long do you wait, right? Because you could be waiting some time, but whilst you're waiting, your business is put at risk. There's a point of you've got loss of sales, people are losing their jobs, people are being put on furlough, you end up with this surplus amount of stock. There's so many different things that are happening. And so it's really about what are the other channels available for you to sell. So not being dominant or not being dependent, solely waiting for Amazon to place those orders. So what are the other options? The other options, of course, if you're solely a vendor, if you have a direct fulfillment setup where you can send product direct to consumer, that can be an option. But the challenge there is you need to have that all set up. It's not like you can just switch it on. And there are many businesses that haven't had the opportunity to even get that set up. So that is one option, but not an option for everyone. The other option is where you mentioned at the start, hybrid. Some businesses have a hybrid setup. And those that have had a hybrid setup are probably very relieved that they have that setup, because it's almost a backup. It's a backup for them for inventory. As in, if Amazon isn't ordering any inventory, they can then sell that product on the seller side. And then if they sell it on the seller side, they have two options. Of course, there's a fulfillment by Amazon. Now, we know with fulfillment by Amazon, that's almost a bit of a scenario that you have on vendor, where, again, is that gate open for you to send in inventory? It might be closed, it might be open, or you might have already had some inventory there. If not, you can then do what we call fulfilled by merchant. So they could just do fulfill those products direct to consumer from their own warehouse. Now, again, a lot depends on a vendor's setup. A lot of the time, these vendors are wholesale setup. They're not set up necessarily for direct to consumer orders. So that's when things become a challenge, because if a business doesn't have that setup, it's not that they can just turn around and start fulfilling orders to customers, right? And also some of them have resource constraints. So if all of those, I talk to vendors and say, well, these are your options, etc., and it's like, none of those are going to work, then is there somebody that can sell for you? Are there, because there are some really great sellers, resellers out there that could take that inventory from that vendor and sell on their behalf. Now, of course, that reseller is going to not just want that temporary, in the sense like, oh yeah, as soon as you get your vendor order, you drop us. There's going to be some sort of agreement there, but that is an option. If it comes to a point where you're just not getting any orders, you need to sell the stock, then that's definitely an option as well. And I've even seen that on LinkedIn and out there, where there are resellers calling out to vendors saying, look, if you guys have stock and you can't get it to the customer, we can do it. That's our expertise. So it's almost like finding, if it's not working at the moment and your product can sell on Amazon, trying to find those experts that can do the job right now. And this is where we all need to reach out and sort of change our way of thinking almost, because the dynamics have changed. So how can we change with it? So there's lots of different options, but of course it depends again on the vendor's setup.
But it also sounds like there's at least one option for everyone, right? It's not that no one can do. I mean, there's some vendors that cannot do business in any way, right? So there is, I mean, on a high level, either you can do the direct to consumer yourself, then you could use the drop shipping through vendor, or you could use the merchant fulfillment by opening up a seller account, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you cannot do this, you find someone that can do it. Is this a good time to start your own direct to consumer business if you don't have any operations in place? I mean, what do you need to do to start direct to consumer? And is this the right time to do it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I could turn around and say, yes, it is a good time because there's opportunity, right? Because some people don't have that setup. But is it the right time to build that setup? Because if we're all in lockdown, most of us, you're not really in a position to start going around finding a place to hold your inventory, or, you know, you would need to have, and how do you get those shipments out? You need to start having those conversations with the different logistics companies. But logistics companies, what are their priorities at the moment? Are their priorities bringing on new clients, or are their priorities just to get product to the customer right now? So you start running into lots of other constraints, as well, as in when you want to start setting something up now, a lot of time people are just focused on current clients and just dealing with current business, because everybody's under constraint in terms of resource a lot of the time as well.
So in normal times, do you have any experience how long this process takes? So let's say I'm a vendor, I only do wholesale so far, and then I start a direct to consumer. Do you have any experience how long that typically takes in normal times, when, you know, there are no crazy times like now?
If a vendor decided to go direct to consumer, I guess, again, it depends on their setup. So some of them might already have a warehouse that's able to do that. So they can set up a seller account, get all their products listed and start fulfilling those orders direct to consumer. If they haven't got the setup, it really depends. It depends on the size of their business and the volume, because a lot of the time they're going to need the software and the systems to read what inventory they have currently in their warehouse, to be able to then update the inventory in Seller Central. And when an order comes, they're going to want the systems. They're not going to be, a lot of these businesses are used to volume on the vendor side. They'd want that volume on the seller side. They need to have the systems in place. It's not really going to be a manual process. So I would say the integration of it all is what would take time. And I guess that seems to be often when I talk often to vendors, and they will go, right, I want to try seller, and we're like, well, you can just set up an account and go for it. But then you hear, well, it's easier said than done. You know, our systems aren't necessarily the most up to date. It works really well getting bulk orders. We're just not set up, and we need to integrate our own internal systems, our accounting systems. And I just say systems here because I'm not very technical. So integrating systems is as far as I go. But I also know that there is with the ordering system and everything. So that can be a bit of a complication. And sometimes also, then there's the customer side of things, where a lot of these businesses don't necessarily deal with the end consumer in terms of responding to the customer, because they just sort of send inventory to your major retailers, your Amazon or your Tesco or other large retailers, let's say in the UK, that they don't actually have to have that customer interaction. So they don't have that customer service department. Their customer is a retailer, and it's a different kind of relationship. So I mean, it's quite complicated, because it really so much depends on the infrastructure and size of that vendor as to how quick they can move. And it's often those smaller vendors that can move quicker than the larger ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree with this, right? There are often some hidden traps that you're not necessarily aware of when you start, right? How do you handle returns? How do you handle customer support, right? Is there even an email address where customers can reach out to? Who's answering? What about taxation, right? If you're in the US and you have sales tax, right? And so, I mean, a bunch of questions that arise suddenly when you go from B2B to B2C, essentially. And so I think I'm not aware of any vendor that really pulled it off in, let's say, 4 weeks or so, right? So I think it's typically a project of, I mean, we talk about 3, 4, 5, 6 months, depending on, again, how fast they move, right? But so it takes a couple of months, right? It's not something that you decide now and you have up and running next week, typically, right?
Yeah.
So switching the focus now. So those are people that are affected, obviously, in a way that is unpleasant, where the POs have dropped. When we think about the other group, so the ones that are suddenly seeing a surge in POs, typically in high demand categories, in the essential categories, right? What are the challenges that those people are experiencing? Or is it just the biggest challenge is counting the revenue? What do they have?
Yeah. It's interesting because you kind of, it's a positive story, which, given current circumstances, it's a bit of a difficult story because, knowing what's happening with others. But the truth is, these businesses are seeing this surge. But actually, some businesses are struggling with that surge because they hadn't planned it. They hadn't forecasted for it. Some of them don't have the inventory to be able to support that demand. And actually, their manufacturers, if they've got some manufacturing plants in Europe, some have even closed, or some are running on skeleton staff, or some don't have as much resource. So manufacturing becomes a bit of a challenge for them to get more supply. So we have seen some businesses, although the orders have come through, not being able to fulfill them. At the same time, we've also seen some businesses see a crazy amount of orders come through, but not being able to fulfill them because of just the resource constraint that they have, that they are social distancing in their warehouse. They have limited resource. And even though Amazon might be a surge for them, if only 20% of their business is based on Amazon and 80% was on retail stores that have closed, that shut down a considerable amount of their business. And some staff have even been put on furlough or aren't working because although Amazon's performing, the large proportion of their business isn't. So so many businesses are going into it. It's affecting them in different ways, but I would say it's great if you've all got all the inventory and the resource. But from conversations that I've had, the biggest challenges are inventory, and then having the sufficient resource. So that the response there is delays in shipments. Now, Amazon is always really strict. They'll charge you for anything, for late shipments, for not responding to POs in 24 hours, everything, the whip is out. But they have sort of started to waive things because they're realizing that those that are getting increase in POs, or even not a surge in POs, are constrained because they just they might not have the resource. And so they need to be aware that it's going to take longer to send those shipments out. And it's interesting how expectations were up here pre-crisis, and now everyone's just like, well, as long as I get it in the end. And so everyone's expectations are realistic in the sense that we know we're going to have to wait for stuff now. And even Amazon Amazon are actually working with vendors now, as opposed to dictating almost.
So that's been very insightful, Karina. Thank you for sharing all of this. There are a couple of questions from our attendees today. From Tracy, the search term reports and brand analytics show insane fluctuations in terms over the course of the last 4 weeks as people adapt to working from home. How do Amazon categorize what is high priority product? Do they go off searches or glance views, page detail views? Any insights into this? How Amazon determines the high priority? So probably a mix, right?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. Amazon are looking at data. Well, first off, they looked at categories, but interestingly, some products were going through the hoop because some products were incorrectly categorized. And so it was a very generic stance, really, because that's assuming that the catalog is products are cleanly categorized, which they're not necessarily. But high priority was very much on how they deemed essentials, but now it seems to be different in the fact of what are customers looking at. And a lot of that will be down to what in an Amazon term is more glance views, detailed page views, understanding what products customers are actually looking at.
Yeah. Karina, that was great. It's been a long session, 50 minutes already. Thank you for sharing all of this. If someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do this?
Yeah, to drop us an email. If you go to our website, which is ecommercenurse.com, you go to contact us and just drop us a message. And if you want to speak to me personally, just sort of say, hi, Karina, and I'll jump on that message. And then we're there to assist with any questions that you may have that you weren't able to cover off today.
Is this also how they can find Vendor Society? So the vendor community, is that on Vendor Nurse, on E-commerce Nurse as well?
Yeah, so there's E-commerce Nurse, which is our main sort of, I say, bread and butter, our agency or the parent company. And for those that are interested in the vendor community, you just go to vendorsociety.com and you just sign up as a member. There's no charge or anything. It's free to be part of the community. You just need to be an active vendor. And so if you're an active vendor, sign up and then you'll be part of our mailing list and you'll round tables as well.
That's great. So I've heard a lot of positive feedback around the community, specifically also from some of our customers, right? So I'm happy to recommend it here. Go and check it out, ecommercenurse.com and vendorsociety.com. Thanks again, Karina, for sharing all of this.